Okay, so section 5.5 is over greatest common factors. So if you remember when we were talking about numbers, the greatest common factor, you have two terms and you're looking at it trying to determine what's the biggest number I can take out of both of these. So that's what we're going to do. What's the biggest number I can take out of all of these? So I can't take out 7 from 5 and I can't take 6 from 5. So our greatest common factor has to be this lowest one, x to the 5th. So on this one, what is the greatest common factor for the list of monomials? So this is 1 set, 2 set, 3 set. This one doesn't have an x, it just has y and z, so I can't factor out an x. They all have y, so I can factor out a y, and then I can factor out the lowest exponent. So I can't take 5 from 3, but I can take 3 from 5. I hope this makes sense. Y'all are going to have questions over this, I hope. There's a z in all of them, so I know I can take a z out. 5, 5, 3. I can't take 5 from 3, but I can take 3 from 5 and have that 2 left over. So my greatest common factor would be y cubed, z cubed, y3, z3. Find the greatest common factor of 12a cubed b, 32a squared b squared, and 16ab cubed. What goes into all of them? 6 goes into 36. 6 doesn't go into 16. 3 doesn't go into that. I think it's 4. 4 goes into 32 8 times, correct? Okay, and 4 goes into 12. 3 times 4 goes into 32. 8 times 4 goes into 16. So we can factor 4 out of all of them. Now then, there's an a in all of them, so I can factor out an a. I have to look for the lowest exponent, 1, so it's that, because I can't take 3 away from 1. I don't want a negative. Now then, b's, we have 1 here, but there's a b in all of them, so that would be my greatest common factor. Find the greatest common factor for the list of monomials. So we have, does 9 go into 63? So we can factor out a 9. There's an x in all of them, so we can factor out an x. Our lowest exponent is this one with 1, so we leave that. Then y, we can factor out a y because there's y in all of them. Our lowest exponent is that 2. There's a z in this one, but there's not a z in the other ones, so just 9xy squared. Factor out the greatest common factor in the polynomial. So first, what goes into both of them? What goes into 20x and 15? We know 5 goes into both of them. So our greatest common factor is 5. So we're going to factor 5 out. When we factor this 5 out, we're going to be dividing it by 5. So I have 5. 20 divided by 5 is 4x. Then 15 divided by 5, and since it's subtract 15, be 3. And then if I multiplied this back out, I would get that 20x subtract 15. Factor out the greatest common factor from the following polynomials. So I have 6 and 18. Does 6 go into 15? 3 times, so I can factor out a 6. And then there's not an x in the first term, but there's a y in both of them, and I can take the highest exponent, so y to the 4th. So when I do this one, remember we're dividing. 6y to the 4th divided by 6y to the 4th, it's the exact same thing. 1. 18 divided by 6 is 3. Here, I'm right over here, so I have 18xy to the 5th. And it's negative divided by 6y xy to the fourth. So 18 divided by 6 equals 3. My x stays. 5 subtract 4 is 1, so negative 3xy. And I can multiply that out to check it. Factor out the greatest common factor from the following polynomial. Let's see, 32 divided by 8 equals 56 divided by 8 equals. So 8 goes in all of them. So first we find our greatest common factor. And then we can take out 2 x's. So we have, I'm going to write it down here, 8x squared and 8x to the fourth divided by 8x squared. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 4, so it'd be x squared. Then we have negative, and it's 32x cubed divided by 8x squared. 32 divided by 8 was 4. 3 subtract 2, so 1. This one's positive, so we have 56x squared divided by 8x squared. 56 divided by 8 is 7. 2 subtract 2 is 0. All right, factor out the greatest common factor from the polynomial. So let's see. Goes into 16 and 34. So 34. 34 divided by 4 equals 8.5. Nope. 8 doesn't go into it. I think we're going to have to go with 2. So we have 2 AB. Then we're going to divide everything by that. So 16 divided by 2 is 8. And then we'd have A4, B4. Subtract 34 divided by 2 is 17, I believe. 17, A6, B6. Plus 34 divided by 2 is 17, and the AB would be gone. And then 2 goes into 40, 20, and A6B would not be there. On this one, factor out the greatest common factor. What they both have in common to factor out is this x plus 1. So we'd have x plus 1 times 2 plus 3a. Because before, what we'd factor out, we'd multiply by the rest of it. So we still have to multiply by the rest of it. So here we can factor out z plus 5, but you have to remember when we factor out that z plus 5, there's still a 1 we assume is here. So it'd be 5x plus 1. Same thing here. So we have 7x to the fourth plus 4 times 5x subtract 3. Factor out the greatest common factor. I can't factor anything from 1 except 1, and it would still be 1. There's no factor other than 1. Factor out the greatest common factor, 55 and 22. So we have 11. And then there's a 5 here, so I can do x to the 5th, y to the 6th. So 55 divided by 11 would be 5, and then I would have an x left. 6 subtract 5 is 1, 6 subtract 6 is 0. Subtract 22 divided by 2 is 2. 5 subtract 5 is 0, 6 subtract 6 is 0. Factor the following polynomial by grouping. So now then, we're going to be doing what we've been doing with another step. So we split it into two groups because we're going to factor by grouping. So what can I factor out of my first group? Would be an A. That's all they both share. And then B plus 6 would be what's left over, because AB divided by A is B. 6A divided by A is just 6. Plus, what can I factor out of my second one? B, 2. 2B divided by 2 would be B. 12 divided by 2 would be 6. And then I'd factor these by grouping. So I'd have B plus 6 times A plus